Alright, listen, I'm gonna be really honest with you. I think that the really early setup of opposing colonialism and the United States presenting themselves as saviors while reinforcing colonial structures would have made for one of, if not the best film in the DCEU. It's a super interesting concept, especially when you take into account which characters they used for that. The Justice Society of America works pretty well here. This is obviously not the role that they have in the comics. They're usually depicted as either heroes of the past, especially World War II, or from a different universe. This would essentially be the United States government sending in their war heroes to neutralize a country in the process of fighting against its occupying militia. This could have been a really interesting story, dealing with the way the United States glorifies its own military as a way of justifying its neo-colonialist force over the rest of the world. This would have been elevated further with the specific choices in characters they used. Hawkman, as described in this film, is the Carter Hall version of the character, who was an Egyptian prince, uses nth metal for his weapon, and is known to reincarnate. His relationship to US hegemony may be more interesting than any other character in DC. He first lived in ancient Egypt, a hegemonic force in its time, which is now subject to neocolonialism at the hands of the United States. That being said, he lived his life as an American, as an archaeologist. How does that factor in? He is sometimes portrayed as fairly conservative. This, again, adds to his importance in what this film could have been. Dr. Fate represents a form of ultimate authority. As host of Naboo, he's the only character we know of with significant knowledge of magic in the DCEU. He's a protector of order, but what does that mean when it comes to the subjugation of an entire country? Both Atom Smasher and Cyclone are fairly young, inexperienced, and with great power. Their connection to the Justice Society comes from their lineage. Atom Smasher is the descendant of Adam, while Cyclone is the descendant of Ma Hunkel, the first Red Tornado. This can mean a lot of things. Use it as a metaphor for young people being suckered into joining the army and later regretting it. Maybe how people are convinced to join the military because of the idolization of their family members who fought in a war in the past. Like I said, it could have been very interesting, but to make good on that, the movie would have to even try a little bit to stick with that concept, which it doesn't. It completely falls apart after the first half hour. Honestly, it does even before that. They more or less give away the twist in the opening flashbacks, and the structure is pretty terrible. This movie was about a hair away from making me nauseous. You have to really do your best to do that. Black Adam joins such classics as Madam Web and Kraven the Hunter. Outside of stronger dedication to any of the themes they attempted to set up, I believe that I've pinpointed one crucial element of this film's failure. And that element is, well, failure. This film has its fair share of complications, and the concept of failure seems to be central to most of them. There are three main ways in which this relates to the film. Firstly, there's the importance of failure in Black Adam. This film has a complicated relationship with failure, especially when it comes to the different characters. Black Adam himself is never shown losing a fight. In a literal sense, I suppose you could interpret this as a lack of failure. That being said, he fails to do plenty of things throughout the film. It's the core of his character in some ways. It starts in the flashbacks. We are supposedly led to believe that Black Adam is this kid. Idealistic, anti-authoritarian, strong-willed. The exact qualities we see in him in the present. Now this turns out to be only half true, as the kid is the one to get powers from the Council of Wizards, but ends up transferring that power to his father, dying as a result. This is one of his greatest failures, letting his son die. A physical failure, accompanied by an ideological one. Compared to his son, he's unwilling and unable to engage in revolutionary action against the ruling oppressive class. That is, until he is given his son's power and motivated by his death. He completely destroys the palace and kills the king, which leads to him being imprisoned by the wizard Shazam after failing to kill the entire council. He fails. Time and time again. He has to rely on others to survive. This continues into the present, where he has to rely first on random humans and later on the Justice Society to save him from his own failures. And yet, we never see him lose. We're told about the consequences of his failures in the past, but we don't see any direct repercussions for him failing in the present. The closest you can get is when he kills Ishmael. Even then, it's shaky. In the flashbacks, Black Adam fails because he lacks any real power. Only when he gets it can he take down the oppressive regime. Even then, he doesn't have a healthy relationship with it. So it makes sense for his excessive reliance on his power to be the reason he fails in the present. And so he hands himself in. And then he gets called back in by Dr. Fate, and he defeats Sabak with his excessive power. What's the point of having this setup if there's no resolution to his arc? Imagine if at the end of Avengers Endgame, when Tony had the Infinity Stones, he didn't snap, but just flew it away to Thor to snap it instead, it'd be incredibly unsatisfying. You've built to this moment, and you don't even do the thing you've been telling us you do. It's so frustrating, but it's not like that's the only time they do it. The bit in the intro about colonialism is a perfect example of this, but that's not where it ends. With virtually every element of this film, it falls short of its own goals. The human characters, Adriana and Amon, become significantly less relevant in the third act. The stuff between Atom Smasher and Cyclone gets dropped after a while, and the tone of the film drastically shifts at a few moments. It's weird. That being said, I want to outline one specific part of the movie that I thought was fun, at times. Dr. Fate and Hawkman. They are easily the best parts of this movie. They're both incredibly well cast and were really fun to watch. But that's all they are. The acting is great, but the characters are just kinda there. Dr. Fate is the better of the two, and the power of the helmet of Naboo is shown as separate from Kent Nelson himself, which can kind of work as a parallel with Black Adam. That being said, it's still not great. The similarities between these characters are shown, but there's never a point of tension around it. With the parallel between Black Adam and Dr. Fate I just described, and the long life of Hawkman, who was originally born in the same area, there's a lot left untouched. Issues of legacy with Atom Smasher and Cyclone, and responsibility to fight against oppression for a group that you are a part of or represent for Hawkman and Cyclone. This is a failure to use the characters. Dr. Fate and Hawkman each fail in a physical sense too. They, along with the rest of the JSA, failed to take down Black Adam and then Sabak. This is crucial because it forces them to reckon with their dependence on the extremely powerful. How do we combat the super powerful without using the super powerful? When do we have to compromise our values for the greater good? And where does it get us? Super interesting ideas. Would be cool if they used any of them in the film. So they failed to defeat Black Adam and they failed to defeat Sabak. Surely they can't also fail in keeping him occupied while waiting on Black Adam to escape. Right? Well, you'll never believe it. Dr. Fate has a vision of Hawkman dying in combat with Sabak. So he takes his place and dies instead, leaving aside the theatrics of him preventing the JSA from joining the fight and all that bullshit. You sacrificed yourself for a guy with reincarnation powers. That's his main thing. Well, now he's dead. Womp womp. Skill issue, to be honest. The second point has to do with what Black Adam represented, the nail in the coffin. I'm not going to pretend that the DCEU was doing great before this movie. Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman 1984, and The Suicide Squad all didn't do great at the box office. That being said, The Suicide Squad was critically well received, and with streaming hits like Zack Snyder's Justice League and Peacemaker right before this, it was the make or break. And it all went downhill from here. Shazam! Fury of the Gods. The Flash, Blue Beetle, and then Aquaman 2. At the very least in a financial sense, this did not go great. And honestly, I'm not mad at it. I'll gladly take the new DC, that's giving us the first Superman movie in almost 10 years. More if you don't count BVS, over the DC that gave us about a minute of Superman total over the same period of time. I'll take the DC with 2 Green Lantern shows and a Green Lantern in its first movie over the DC that gave us 1 dead Green Lantern in a flashback in a movie that's not even canon. It's hardly perfect, especially when it comes to Wonder Woman, but the DCEU had way more than 3 strikes. I'm glad it's over and done with, so we can turn to something better, and hopefully a Wonder Woman movie. You can do it! Come on! The final mode in which this movie relates to failure has to do with the lead actor, Dwayne Johnson himself. As you may or may not know, Black Adam changed the hierarchy of power in the DC universe. Fuck no it didn't. But it would have if it didn't flop. The Rock had plans for DC, and they were fucking terrible. Here's the context. You know that pretty cool Shazam movie? Yeah, that was based on the New 52 Shazam story that was printed in the Justice League book at the time. That comic had Black Adam in it, as well as Sivana. Dwayne Johnson was supposed to be Black Adam in that, and confirmed this 5 years before that movie actually released. But then he dropped out in favor of a solo movie. Shazam was then supposed to appear in a post-credit scene in Black Adam, where he would be recruited for the JSA by Hawkman. Sound familiar? Yeah, that's because it was transferred to Shazam 2, and Hawkman was swapped out for Harcourt and Economos from Peacemaker. This happened because The Rock allegedly vetoed plans to even get characters from Black Adam in there at all. Speaking of Shazam 2, by the way, he also refused to appear in that. Johnson's seeming distaste for the Shazam movies and character had so much impact on his plans for DC that he pushed Black Adam's main hero to the side. This guy wanted to have an entire movie about Black Adam fighting a superhero. But no, it wasn't Shazam versus Black Adam. That would be ridiculous. It was Superman. That's the reason Cavill's Superman appeared in the post-credit scene of this movie. That's also the reason he added a post-credit scene to the Super Pets movie he starred in featuring Black Adam and his dog. A scene, by the way, that featured Dwayne Johnson as Krypto, John Krasinski as Superman, Dwayne Johnson as Black Adam, and Dwayne Johnson as Black Adam's dog. That being said, this fight really would not have gone well, especially considering the clause in The Rock's contract saying he can't lose fights. Regardless, this wasn't the most promising in my opinion. Not that it matters now, but it looks like things worked out in everyone's favor. DC is moving on to bigger and better things, and The Rock is working on an A24 film with Scorsese. Nothing to complain about there. To keep it short, Black Adam isn't great. There were a lot of opportunities spread all over it like Christmas decorations, screaming at you, hey, this could have been a great movie. Yeah, I know it's ass, but if you squint and look into a different universe, it could actually be awesome. There's plenty to say about it, but ultimately it's just a mess. Throwing it over to the tier list, this lands at a low D tier. It's just incoherent. It's weird. If you disagree with me, take it out in the comment section. Meanwhile, I gotta go, rescue my country from colonizers, or fight American superheroes, or is it supremacy, or the devil? Is that the devil? This is giving me a headache. Whatever, have a good one.